rather than having a power of attorney for healthcare purposes, as Ontario has, or a personal care directive, as Alberta has, we have a representation agreement. Basically the same thing. You appoint someone to make decisions for you when you are incapable. But there it stops being simple. Because in BC we've got two kinds of representation agreements. I've mentioned under 3 the non-standard agreement. That's the agreement under which basically you can give any and all of your powers to decide around personal care, around health care. You can assign that to your representative. Anything that's not illegal. But all of your, any and all, you don't have to give them all away. You can give some. You can give some powers to one person, other powers to another person. Generally not a good idea, because what if they overlap and they have disagreements or there's a gap in between? But you can do that. You can basically do whatever you want, as long as you make sure, like with the will, with the enduring power of attorney, with the advance directive, as I mentioned, you have to have 2 witnesses, and you have to be capable. Now, you may remember that before September the 1st, if you wanted to do this kind of, and it used to be called an enhanced representation agreement. Some people who know the legislation talk about a Section 9 agreement. You may have heard about that before. You must be fully capable before you can have such an agreement. And it used to be that the government, through its legislation, required that you went to a lawyer to get a consultation certificate, where the lawyer would say, yes, I've talked to this person, I've talked to Gerrit, he's just done his Section 9, his non-standard agreement, and yes, he understands the power he's given to his representative. So before September the 1st, you always had to go to a lawyer. Since September the 1st, you don't have to do that anymore. You still need to have 2 witnesses, and there are a few other requirements, but there are pointers for that in that My Voice booklet that I mentioned earlier. Now, people that have been capable, but due to dementia, brain injury, are no longer fully capable, or people that have never been fully capable, they can use what is called the so-called Section 7 representation agreement. You don't have to pass a test, as long as you have some notion of, yes, this person is going to make decisions for you, you know this person, you trust this person, then it would be valid. Mind you, there's nobody looking over the shoulders, so sometimes people can get away with things that otherwise they might not. But in general, we have no reason to believe that this is abused on any kind of scale. So this can be used even by people that are not capable. There are restrictions, and this is an odd one because I've talked, of course, about the power of attorney for healthcare purposes. This agreement can also be used by the not fully capable person to give authority to their representative around routine financial management of their affairs, routine financial decision making. There are certain things that are very important to know you cannot do under this type of agreement. For example, you cannot give your representative end-of-life decision-making authority. So that person would not be able to make a decision around CPR and other end-of-life decisions. And that person, and that's often misunderstood, you may have heard different, but a person under a Section 7 agreement, where you don't have to be fully capable, cannot make decisions with respect to admissions to care facilities. So there are some important, on the one hand, safeguards, but also limitations. So since it's no longer necessary to have a lawyer, if you're fully capable, do a Section 9 agreement. It's far better. but I want to be able to write that down so that my son isn't burdened with the guilt or the responsibility of making that decision. And that made so much sense to me. Well, you can do that now. You can even have, and here's where it really becomes a little complicated, you can even have both. You can have an advance directive and you can have a representation agreement. Now the beauty of that, if that's what you want, the beauty is that if there are certain things that you're absolutely certain about, you know, some people say, and you've already heard some of the reasons that you might want to make that decision, I don't want to be resuscitated. I don't want CPR. You can do that, put that in your advance directive, and then you can say, but everything else, where maybe there is some judgment to be made, depending on how seriously ill I am, depending on what kind of condition I'm in, I want somebody else to make that decision for me. So you can do that by means of a representation agreement. The only thing is that if you have both, you have to say in your representation agreement, oh, by the way, I also have an advance directive. And that, I know it's a bit complex. And you must, that advance directive, that will speak for itself. And you, my representative, can't make decisions about that. So if you're very clear about certain things, straightforward things that you don't want to have happen, then put those in an advance directive.
Research about advanced directives and planning and all this kind of stuff shows several things. First, that your ideas about what seems right or wrong will change over time. Okay, so what you might say, if I can't walk, I'd sooner be dead. Believe me, things will change. Because people who are healthy always choose death over disability. But most people find with a chronic illness, the human spirit is able to find meaning and joy in other things, and things change over time. The other thing is that decision-making is can be extraordinarily stressful for people who are doing it. But if you have a conversation with that person, that helps immensely, and that's a huge gift you can leave to your loved ones by having that conversation. Now, should that conversation be read off like a menu list, you know, I don't want resuscitation, I might take a feeding tube, I'll have a this and a that, and you know, by the way, if they invent, you know, brain transplants, I'll go for one of those too. That makes it difficult, right? Because who knows what situation you're going to have to be dealing with. I think it's wonderful if the conversation can focus around what gives your life quality, what gives your life meaning, and are there things that would be worse than death for you? Worse than death. And this will change over time, but if you keep the conversation going, you will leave a great legacy to your loved ones, because I have seen people who say, we don't have a problem. We know what mom or dad or brother or sister would want in this situation, would prefer. We know how they would think about this. The other thing is, oftentimes people get in the situation where they're decision making and they say, we've never talked about this, you know, not even in the car, because usually the car is where all those difficult conversations can occur, right? Or the bus. At a bus stop, that's where most people get health information as well too. But anyways, it's very important that you think back about that person, because it's surprising how many people, when they start to tell me about their loved one, could remember their views about things, their values about things, and could actually recall, you know, how they would have viewed this, and because it does help. The other last point I want to make is, oftentimes healthcare providers make mistakes by asking you, in a way that makes it feel like you're making a decision to pull the plug. Now, the person wouldn't have a plug to pull if they didn't have a very serious illness, right? And so you're not ending their life. And that's very important. What you are deciding is not to continue with a treatment that is burdensome or that is not effective. And that's very different from, I decided to pull the plug on my sister. And that's kind of important to know. And so if you feel like that's happening, have a discussion with the team, because that's very important. What we really need you to be when you're a substitute decision maker is kind of like look at it with the eyes of the person that you're representing. So not what you may want or not what you'd hope, but how you think they would see the situation.